Most Asian stocks were lower at the close as investors awaited inflation data from Australia and Japan later this week. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index was down 0.8% in its final hour of trading, while mainland China marked a fourth straight day of losses, shedding 0.5%. Stock futures were mixed as the market is set to enter the last week of June and the first half of 2024 near record highs. U.S. futures on the Nasdaq Composite and the S&P 500 are both little changed. The Dow Jones average futures climbing 102 points, about 0.3% up, and the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq closing marginally lower on Friday, weighed down by a decline in Nvidia shares that dragged down the technology sector. Technology was the biggest loser amongst the 11 major S&P 500 sectors, weighed down, of course, by Nvidia, while communication services led the gain. The JSE is mostly trading higher, with the all-share index climbing 0.8%. The rand weaker at 18 rand 12 to the dollar, 22 rand 95 to the pound, and 19 rand 45 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $2,325 and platinum at just over $1,000 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude is at $85.59 a barrel. To give us more details, we are joined by Gary Boyson, who is a portfolio manager at Rand Swiss. Gary, thank you so much for your time. I mean, let's unpack in perhaps even greater detail in terms of what you're seeing when it comes to global market sentiment, as well as what we're seeing on the local side, seeing that we are waiting for those cabinet appointments.
Yeah, I think locally we have got a little bit of a skittish start to the day, and you can see that in the local currency price against the US dollar. So just creeping back up the 18 rand handle, 18.12, and I think it really is. It's the devil is in the details. So we want to see what cabinet appointments go to who, and that's going to, I think, determine how much stronger the local currency and SA can get. That said, we've had a couple of results out today as well. So the likes of the industrial index up 1.4%, that being dragged higher by a big run in the Naspers process stable. As I said, financials taking a little bit of a breather today. We've had an incredible week as we had all the optimism around the inauguration, the government of national unity. So, the banks and insurers looked very, very good, just coming off slightly today, down around 1/3%. And the resources also doing fairly well. A little bit of, I suppose, a cautious mood internationally. We're seeing the likes of the gold price moving up slightly, up 0.2%, that helping to lift some of the gold miners. But the resource index posed for a bit of a recovery also, I think, with that slightly firmer Brent crude oil price. So that up around 2%. Over in Europe, we've got Paris and Frankfurt both around 0.5% positive. The FTSE in the UK also looking solid. So European markets recovering some of those losses that we saw, the S&P 500 take on Friday. And we'll see what happens at 3:30 this afternoon.
You mentioned that we did get some company earnings out this morning, the likes of Naspers and Prosus reporting their financials. What's the earnings story here as you look at those numbers? What was the key takeaway?
I think the key takeaway is something that we've been saying to the market for a while, which is that the e-commerce profitability really is key to the story behind the Naspers process stable. It's not just about the rump and what can Tencent do and the discount to Tencent, although we have seen that narrow significantly, and the share buybacks and the so-called financial engineering that had been avoided for so long is now starting to take hold. The group saying that the NAV per share accretion is around 9% just because of their share buyback program. But what we're seeing really is a much more simplified structure, and we're starting to see that profitability coming through to some of those early stage investment companies. So, the goal was to have profitability by 2025. We've got that around 6 months ahead of schedule. So a great set of results, and the market marking the stock up around 4% on the back of that, although it has come down slightly. So looking at about 3.5% up at the moment. Revenue growth, top line growth of 18%, which for a company of this size is just absolutely incredible.
Let's talk leadership, because July 1st, the new CEO, Fabrizio Bloisi, takes over as CEO of Naspers and Prosus. What does he have to contend with coming into, I suppose, the legacy of what was a complicated structure? And I suppose as well, let's talk about what the market wants to see going forward from this new leadership build.
Well, I think it's the right move. So I think what the market wants to see is, what Naspers should be good at, which is taking that money and investing it in early stage startups and essentially finding the next 10 cent for us. I think that's what the market definitely wants to see. Either that, or if you can't find that, pay us back the dividends via either share buybacks or special dividends. So, looking at it, as the incoming CEO, this was telegraphed to the market, about a month ago. So it is well known. It's not essentially new news today. But he was formerly the CEO of iFoods. Took over iFoods when there was only 20 employees. They're now 5,000 employees. They work with close to 300,000 different couriers. It's one of the leading food delivery brands in Latin America, and has around 5,000 employees. So the type of CEOs that's had experience in growing one of these early stage tech companies and making it into an incredible success, which is the kind of experience that you want at the helm of Naspers as he shepherds through the next round of startups that need to change the world.
In terms of data or events you're paying attention to for the rest of the week, what's on your radar?
I think that the big one is obviously going to be the cabinet, and if you look back at the first half of this year, it's been an interesting story. So everyone has been saying how the JSE is done for, and yet we've had incredible performance from the local exchange. So if I just look back at let's say the top risers and top losers of the first half of this year, got the likes of PanAf up 52%. We've got Raubex up 46%. Fortress Property Fund up 145%. So some really significant gains, and that helping to lift the overall index. And we've actually crept ahead of something like the FTSE. In the US, of course, we're always going to be looking at earnings as well, and we want to take that into account. But at the same time, if you look at the overall performance of the S&P 500 companies, it's actually kind of the athleisure companies. Something like Lululemon, they're down almost 40% in dollar terms. That just with the rising interest rates. So I think a lot to look at, and I think we'll obviously be paying keen attention to anything that feeds into the interest rate expectations in the US as well.
And here, Gary, I was hoping you would say that you're going to be paying attention to the Biden versus Trump US presidential debate on Thursday. But we'll leave that conversation for another time. That is Gary Boyson, who is a portfolio manager at Rand Swiss. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll have more news for you. Stay tuned.